Hello Eternum and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news, and this is the War Report. No change in the dynamic of Eternum last night as Carl Sagan's pagans are turned away in Brightwood by the forces of KOTT. KOTT news crews were on the scene for reactions from the citizens at 11 when we ran into KOTT preparing to travel to Morningdale for a celebratory hot tub soak. I'm sure the citizens would just like to know what's going to go on with Brightwood as we're coming out of the harshest winter in Eternum's history and then going into spring.
Honestly, our future goals are just to stay on top of the forums and see if the devs actually care about us. For right now, I think we're just going to keep Brightwood as is. We like it. It's our home. Try not to keep taxes too high and, keep everything upgraded and the upkeep on top,
3 simulated fantasy combat resolutions on tap for tonight, brought to you by LARPCO brand Simulated Fantasy Combat Gear. Up first, Running Dawn attempts an early evening assault on Eternals for the rights to control the medicinal hot springs and bamboo forest preserves of Ebonscale. Founding house of Weaver's Fen, Running Dawn was one of the first 8 to claim land in Eternum before losing it in conflict to Imperial Guard after 2 weeks. That was the beginning of their story of perseverance, which continues on today as they attempt to retake Ebonscale in the name of the Covenant. Up next, the reigning champions of Everfall, Reverfall, put their Neverfall championship belt on the line, defending the title from the marauding forces of Evora. Evora has recently begun expanding their territory, successfully negotiating Restless Shore from Iterum Autem for some agreed-upon, undisclosed terms. For Reverfall, their second Neverfall, on their journey to overcome the current Neverfall record of 10, currently held by Elysian, who have retired. And in the nightcap, newcomer, All Your Bacon, tries to bring home the bacon by taking the financial capital of Windsward from the forces of Regime. Recent negotiations involving original claims of land ownership have caused marauders of Hex lineage to rise up and demand the Great Trade Hub be made green. But regime forces have their own plan for the tithings gathered in Windsward as they continue to sacrifice gold to the Death Wall in an effort to appease it, hoping it will unveil the lands beyond. KOTT news crews are signing up for the press pass tonight, so be sure to tune in for complete coverage and reactions from the citizens at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello Eternum and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news, and this is the War Report. No change in the dynamic of Eternum last night as defending forces hold out on all 3 fronts. After the final battle of the night in Windsward, community leaders distributed rations to those participating in the defensive efforts. But not all citizens were happy with the decisions of current leadership, erecting a tent city outside Windsward North Gate in protest of the assigned property taxes for the hamlet. KOTT news crews spoke to the protest leaders about their efforts to bring attention to their concerns.
Yeah, this is a movement. This is no more taxes. Down with the taxes. We're taking back this city. This North Gate, this is our gate now. This is Tent City. When you leave this city, you join Tent City. Tent City will provide for you where they have failed. They might have taken our topaz gypsum, but they will not take our freedom. Is that right, boys? Can I get an amen for all this? That's right, brother. Tent City. Blakeness is going to learn, John. He's going to learn. You don't mess with Tent City. He sent flamethrowers out here, all kinds of craziness. We won't have it. We won't stand for it. No.
KOTT news crews were unable to reach regime leadership for comment on this issue. Turning to the weather, would you look at that? Clear all morning long again, and still clear until early evening when, as the early matchup begins, slight chance of invasion in Everfall, with more outbreaks responding to the war in the surrounding regions of Restless Shore and First Light. This will ripple into Windsward around 9, with possible northern chill sending some late evening invasions into Brightwood from the north. 2 officially sponsored simulated fantasy combat resolutions on the books for tonight. Up first, the marauding forces of Evora attempt to claim the fishing ports of Reekwater from the Iron Chefs of Eternals through right of Shokugeki. KOTT news crews have been unable to contact Evora leadership on the matter of their intentions. but they have hit the ground running this spring, becoming quite the predators. For Eternals, maintaining control of the fresh fish resources of Reekwater in order to supply the freshest, finest sushi to their citizens in Ebonscale is a large priority, and as such, the secret ingredient for tonight's Shokugeki to determine whose cuisine reigns supreme will be large catfish. In the post-invasion's nightcap, the instigators initiate interpersonal interaction with the forces of Regime for control of the northernmost region of Morningdale. Regime has been encouraging all citizens to utilize the public bathworks hot tub in town square between invasions and show little sign of concern for tonight's war. This will be the instigators' second attempt to seize Morningdale from these same Regime forces, though more pedigreed in their ability to capture a region, having once held Weaver's Fen. We'll have the outcomes and reactions from the citizens tonight at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello, Eternum, and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news. And this is the War Report. Dynamic change in the history of Eternum last night as the forces of Predator beat the Iron Chefs of Reekwater, and the instigators topple the Covenant juggernaut Regime in Morningdale. KOTT news crews were on the scene in Morningdale after the event to speak with defeated Covenant forces. Well fought battle out there today. I know there's a lot of hustle on both sides. Unfortunately, there could only be one winner, and that was not you tonight. What are your plans now that you've been deposed from Morningdale?
Well, running down going to take the next territory, all right? That's a fact.
KOTT news crews were then able to secure an interview with instigator leadership about their intentions for the hamlet. JChalant, KOTT News, thanks for taking the time to chit-chat with me about tonight's outcome. Recently, the victor here in Morningdale, the instigators now the ruling leaders of the region. What are your plans for the region going forward?
Right now, we're gonna build up the refining stations here in Weaver's Fen, as well as the crafting stations. And then we're going to purge the corruption that is appearing in this land. And then we're going to prepare for the expansion of the north that is unexplored.
Very well, my friend. Is there anything else you'd like to add before letting you go on your way?
We just want to say thank you to everybody that came out today, all the instigators that came out on the battle.
From the conflict in the north, we turn now to a project of peace as we go live to JChalant covering a couple stories in Brightwood. Thanks, JC. I'm standing here in Brightwood at the first Brightwood Cathedral, currently under construction. As you can see, though it nears completion, no Freemason, nor even humble builder, appear to be working on the project. This is due largely to the citizens' focus on planting spring crops and hunting wild bears emerging from hibernation in the woods. Having experienced the sheltering benefit of the cathedral during the harshest winter in Eternum's history, current community leadership have vowed to complete the project.
JChalant, I forgot to tell you, one of our upcoming projects that we're all pretty focused on is getting this church finished. As you can see, it's been under construction since the server started, and we really want to get it done.
Resources are still limited in Brightwood, having used much of the stored firewood to get through the winter. But loggers and Freemasons looking for work on the project should apply at the mission board near City Hall. KOTT news crews have also discovered that Kokiotos intends to hold a charity gala fashion event this afternoon at the cathedral in order to raise funds and community awareness. Turning to the weather, and it's another beautiful morning taking us through into early afternoon, when early invasions in Ebonscale and Weaver's Fen give way to light outbreaks in First Light and Windsward. No conflict to resolve tonight, so enjoy your night of peace, Eternum. If anything happens, we'll let you know. Tonight at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello, Eternum, and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news. And this is the War Report. No change in the dynamic of Eternum last night, as an evening of peace was had by all. In civic news, the fashion gala held yesterday in Brightwood helped raise attention to the recently initiated Cathedral Completion Project. For those that asked, yes, you can get to the top, and it's pretty easy. Only 2 out of 5 Super Marios. Turning to the weather, Early reports indicate another beautiful morning lasting well through the afternoon before early evening cold fronts from the north will bring invasions. Later, tropical swells will induce coastal tides of invasions washing up onto Monarch's Bluff, with possible eastern coastal swells in Reekwater later. Only one officially sanctioned simulated fantasy combat event on the books tonight. Brought to you by LARPCO brand foam core simulated combat gear. Remember, if it's not LARPCO, it's cardboard. Covenant newcomer Milkit challenges the Marauders of Civil Riot for control of the salt marsh oil reserves of Cutlass Keys. KOTT News has been unable to contact a Milkit representative to determine if they are descendants of Church of Disrespect. But even if they are, Civil Riot were the ones to defrock the original landowners, so they're unlikely to acknowledge any claim to the keys from any source. We'll have the outcomes and reactions from the citizens tonight at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello, Eternum, and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news. And this is the War Report. Dynamic change in the history of Eternum last night as the dairy monks of Milkit capture the secondary oil reserves of Cutlass Keys. Upon seizing the hamlet, the company immediately rebranded as Milady's White Knights and began issuing declarations of war in other regions. More on that later, but first we caught up with Milkit namesake Milks to ask about the war. Big night tonight, having taken one of the regions, Cutlass Keys. Would you care to tell us about it, what your outcomes were on the field, how you felt about the fight, and possibly tell us about your intentions for the hamlet going forward?
Well, I would first like to start with saying I was not even in the war, so I can't say how it went down on either side. But I hope everyone on both sides enjoy themselves. And the plans are going to be... Stay tuned.
KOTT News will bring you more on that story as it develops. Turning to the weather. Another beautiful morning until early afternoon, when light invasions will impact Cutlass Keys and Morningdale. This just handed to me. Covenant company Milady's White Knights rebrands back to Milkit, but design new company crest. KOTT News will bring you more on this story as it develops. Wrapping up the weather, 25% chance of invasion tonight after the wars as southern tropics and northern winds push invasions into Eternum. Another last-minute adjustment made to the official LARPCO lineup for tonight's events. I'm being told there's a new graphic available. Oh, and it's the Church of Biz settling on their identity and declaring war on the forces of Eternals for control of Ebonscale. I guess this is the thing we were to stay tuned for, immediately declaring war after winning one last night. For the forces of Eternals, defending the unique architecture of Ebonscale is their declared priority, so we should expect an impassioned war. In the later matchup, it's the forces of Primordius Virtue attempting to claim the fishing port town of Reekwater from the unsupervised. For Primordius, their pride as one of the original founding houses is on the line as they attempt to increase the size of their domain. Whereas unsupervised, formerly known as Predator, formerly known as Evora, formerly known as Vergerus, have only just begun their occupation of Reekwater, but have many allies in many regions. Be sure to tune in for complete coverage and reactions from the citizens at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello, Eternum, and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news. And this is the War Report. Another dynamic change in the history of Eternum last night as the Church of Biz takes control of Ebonscale, and the founding house Primordius expands its territory to the south by seizing the fishing port town of Reekwater. Members of Church of Biz were unavailable for comment after the war, investigating rumors of a reported misplaced vessel to possibly leave the island, while members of Primordius Virtue had this to say about Reekwater.
That's it.
Turning to the weather, clear skies all morning long again until mid-afternoon invasions caused by tropical swells. These will grow into early evening accumulation through the central corridor, so adjust your travel plans accordingly. 2 officially sponsored simulated fantasy combat events on the books for tonight, brought to you by LARPCO. Up first, Primordius Virtue has to defend the primary oil reserves of Weaver's Fen from the marauding forces of Fung's retirement home. Fung's retirement home flies a familiar banner trimmed in marauder green, their allegiance in conquest is clear. Primordius has been on a roll lately, having taken 2 regions in a week. This will be their first defense of the peat moss oil fields, but it ain't their first rodeo.
That's it.
In the late matchup, Aurum Profanum declare war on the forces of Unsupervised for control of the spices of First Light. The Covenant forces of Aurum Profanum take it on faith that Unsupervised have left First Light unattended and are making their move. Unsupervised seems to be having a hard time defining themselves since expanding beyond First Light. But tonight's fight will still decide who are the Spice Lords of Eternum. We'll have the outcomes and reactions from the citizens tonight at 11. Until then, this has been War Correspondent JChalant, KOTT News. Hello Eternum and welcome to KOTT News, Eternum's #1 source for news. And this is the War Report. Dynamic change in the history of Eternum last night as the forces of Fung's retirement home capture the peat moss oil fields of Weaver's Fen. Representatives of Fung's retirement home were unavailable for comment, but KOTT News will bring you more from Weaver's Fen as the story develops. Turning to First Light, KOTT News crews were on the scene to report on the war live when an unusual scene developed. A tri-factional collective calling themselves the Camelot Council were holding court over the citizens prior to the war. KOTT News crews caught up with one of the accused. The jury deliberated and found him guilty of evicting somebody from the war lineup. Is that what he's been found quote-unquote guilty of?
I just want to make a statement that all evidence was circumstantial and I was found guilty in a kangaroo court. Thank you. Peace out.
KOTT News will bring you more on this story as it develops. Following the war, KOTT News caught up with unsupervised leadership to discuss their intentions. Do you mind if I ask you what your plans are for the hamlet?
We are going to hold this as our main homestead. It's one of the wonderful starting towns for everybody that's coming up in boats and whatnot to check out Eternum. So we're just going to hold it as long as we possibly can and make everything great again.
All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I just want to say hi to my mom and my kids, my wife. Love you guys.
Turning to the weather, it's another beautiful morning with a microburst of invasion early afternoon. More invasions picking up again in the early evening as northern winds push into Ebonscale, and look out after that as huge tropical swells from the southeast stir up more trouble throughout the south-central corridor. So plan your travel appropriately. It's a rare night of peace in Eternum as all companies shelter in place, but a certain someone is celebrating their birthday, and you never know how that might turn out.
Be sure to tune in for reactions and commentary from the citizens at 11. Until then, this has been Isis, co-starring for my birthday.